and welcome to JT Guitar. Today we're taking a look at what's so great about Telecasters. They're twangy, they're old-fashioned, they're basic, they're not especially good-looking. So why 70 years later are they still so popular? Telecasters have a really cool history. They are the first very successful or commercially successful mass-produced guitar. And they first went into production in 1950, but they were originally called the Broadcaster. Then they ran into issues because Gretsch had a drum range called the Broadcaster, but spelled with a K. So temporarily in, I think the late 50s and early 1951, they trimmed off the word Telecaster. So they would just said Fender. And these are now what's known as the no-casters, the ones in that period. And they're really sought after, super collectible. And then in late 1951, they were named the Telecaster, and they've been called Telecasters ever since. One of the great things about the construction of a Telecaster is that it was the first guitar to be mass-produced where you had the neck and the body made separately. This meant that for professional players at the time, if there was a problem with either the neck or the body, it was easy to take it to the factory and either switch out that part or get it replaced or have it modified. It also meant that the production would be much quicker for Fenders. You'd have a team making the bodies, team making the necks, and then they'd be assembled on like an assembly line. One of the other things that I think is really clever is that they, and this goes overlooked I think, but they were first marketed as having a bolt-on neck, and we still say it's a bolt-on neck. It's got a bolt-on neck. It's rubbish, it's not bolt-on, they're screwed on. They're not bolted. And bolt-on sounds so much more stable and secure than screwed on. Obviously there's nothing wrong with screwed on necks. You know, they've worked for 70 years, so proof's in the pudding. But it doesn't, in a world where you had glued in set or sometimes one piece necks and bodies, then calling it bolt-on is much more reassuring than a screw-on neck. So I think that's an overlooked sort of genius part of, or genius thing on Leo Fender's part. The reason for this narrow headstock design is because it was made from a single piece of maple. And unlike other guitars at the time, where you'd have a wing on each side to make the headstock go out like you see on acoustic guitars. One of the things that didn't take off though from these original models is they originally had like a metal cover that went over this section. And they became known as ashtrays because that's basically all they were good for. When you had them on, you couldn't palm mute because the strings were covered, and you couldn't strum closer to the bridge to get those bright twangy tones that became so popular. Another thing that I absolutely love to do with the construction and design on Telecasters is these tuning pegs. The way they work is the string slots into the peg and then you wind it up, and it means you've got no sharp stabby bits. And I don't know why all guitars don't just have that. It's the best system, it just is the best system. So the fact that they were doing that in the 50s is incredible. Another thing I love about the construction of a Telecaster is that the strings go through the body. You've got these ferrules here, these are called, I think, and the strings go through there, come out the front, and then when you hit the strings, the whole thing rings much more than it would if they were just coming through the front. And it's what I actually don't like about Strats, is that it's on a spring system, and I just think it sounds a lot softer. Whereas the Tele is much punchier, it really cuts through, which is what I'll talk about next. The tone of a Telecaster is obviously a huge reason as to why it's so popular. You can go from, on the neck pickup, you get these really deep, warm, creamy, smooth tones. Then on the bridge pickup, you've got these quite searing, quite in-your-face, jangly, twangy sounds, which are very well known in country music, you know, that kind of twangy, plinky, what do you call them, like banjo roll kind of sound. And you can do everything in between. They really are a very versatile guitar. If you're worried about the twanginess, that's what the tone knob's for. You just roll that tone knob back and it just reduces that twang slightly and makes it sound more akin to a humbucking pickup. Another good thing about that brightness though, is that it cuts through a mix. If you're playing on stage with lots of other guitarists, if they're all playing Les Pauls and you're playing a Telecaster on the bridge pickup, even if they're louder, you'll still be heard because it just sits in a slightly higher frequency range than on a Les Paul or any other guitar basically using a neck pickup. In fact, quite a few Les Paul players, a lot of them started out as Tele players or went back to Telecasters. Apparently Stairway to Heaven was recorded on a Telecaster. I don't know if that's true or not, it might just be a rumour, and I can't be able to find out. Another one actually, another Les Paul player playing a Telecaster, apparently Gary Moore recorded Still Got Blues for You on a Telecaster. But that could be made up again. I don't know. That's what I heard. Let me know in the comments if you know whether that's true or not. Another great thing about the price of Telecasters is you can buy a Telecaster at almost any price. The very cheapest Telecaster you can buy at the moment would be a Squier Bullet Telecaster, which is about £119.99. And then the most expensive, you're looking at like a custom shop, which is can be up to £11,000, but really between 3 and 4,000 or 3 and 5,000 is a normal custom shop range. So there's a Tele at every price range, whatever your budget, whatever your playing level, there's a Telecaster for you. And that's got to be a huge reason as to why they're still so popular. As well as lots of different prices, you've got a real variety of Telecasters. There is a Telecaster for just about every style, but then the more commonly known ones are, you've got obviously the original 50s Telecaster, then you also have the, let me see if I get this right without looking, so you've got the thin line, the custom, the deluxe, and there's also one which I've never played but I've seen called the Junior, and it's kind of based on, I think, a Les Paul Junior, because it's a P90 with like a more Les Paul style pickguard. And it's got 2 P90 pickups. I would love to try one of those. They look really cool. I love P90s. I'm in a real danger now of going off on a P90 tangent. I think P90s are kind of the best pickups, and I don't know why we haven't all just accepted that. So this Telecaster, in case anyone's wondering, this is my Fender Made in Japan Telecaster from 1985. And it's a 50s reissue. It's obviously, it can't be an early 50s reissue because they didn't have this burst finish when they were first made. I think they were either natural or butterscotch, the first ones in the like 1950 to 52. And they're also known as the black plates because they all just had these single ply black plates. It's got a V to C shaped neck on the back. It's got a little Made in Japan then. This, in case any of you can see that from there and are wondering, this guitar is the only guitar I've ever named. This guitar I've called Yami, which is Japanese for darkness or the dark. I named it that because of obviously the burst and the black pickguard. And yeah, I really love this guitar. I don't play it as much as my custom made one, my Stonewolf, and then my second most favourite guitar is my Gordon Smith. And it's purely because this has got a 7.5-inch fretboard radius, which is super curvy, and it means you have to have the action quite high to avoid notes choking out, which makes it a little bit harder to play. But that's not a problem with new Telecasters. You can buy Telecasters with much wider fretboard radius. Even like a 9-inch fretboard radius is much easier to set up. But I love the V shape here, the V to C. That's really, really nice. And yeah, I mean, also another feature, because it's a 50s reissues, you've got these 3 saddles, so you can't adjust intonation individually. You've also got this bit here, which is from where normally the ashtray would sit, but obviously you don't need it, and it just kind of gets in the way of the string a little bit, and it's a bit scratchy. But again, modern Telecasters don't bother with these little side bits. They've just got the end bit, and then it's smooth and flat. But it's a quirk, it's a piece of character, and yeah, I absolutely love this guitar. So why do you love Telecasters? Or maybe you hate them? Either way, let's talk about it in the comments section below. I love this Telecaster, but it's not without its faults. And maybe I'll do a video someday which is, I don't know, this however many number of things I don't like about Telecasters. There's not going to be many. But if you'd like to see more videos going forward, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.